A letter crossed my desk not long ago from a man who had just retired at 60, 7 after spending 4 decades with the same company. He did not write to ask me about a stock. He did not ask me whether the market was too high or whether bonds would outperform next year. He wrote something much more honest than that. He said he felt lost. That word stayed with me, because when people talk about retirement, they usually talk about money first. They talk about account balances, withdrawal rates, Social Security, Medicare, taxes, and whether the portfolio is large enough. Those are real questions, and I would never dismiss them. But after watching people for a very long time, I can tell you that retirement is not mainly a money problem. It is a life problem. Money matters, of course. Not having enough can make old age feel frightening and narrow, but a great many people discover something surprising once they finally stop working. The hardest adjustment is not that the paycheck stopped. The hardest adjustment is that the structure stopped. The calendar that told them who they were, the meetings, the deadlines, the role, the feeling that each morning already had an answer built into it. Then one day they wake up and no one needs them in the same formal way that can feel like freedom. It can also feel like free fall. I understand retirement differently than most people because I have never treated work as a burden I was trying to escape. I still do what I do because I enjoy it. That makes me unusual. Most people will retire, and many of them should, but because I kept working. I have had a very long time to watch what retirement does to people when they enter it with the wrong assumptions. The ones who do best are not always the richest. They are the ones who understand what this stage of life is actually asking from them. It is asking them to simplify. It is asking them to protect their health. It is asking them to stop confusing net worth with life worth. It is asking them to find meaning that no longer comes from a job title. And it is asking them to make peace with enough of the past that they can still use the present properly. That is the real curriculum of retirement. Now let me begin with the first truth because it shocks people when they finally live it. Most retirees need less money than they feared. That does not mean they need no money. It does not mean planning is unnecessary or that careless people will be rescued by optimism. What it means is that many people mentally calculate retirement expenses using the spending habits of working life, and those two lives are not the same. Working costs money, commuting costs money, professional clothing costs money, eating out because you are exhausted costs money, stress costs money. A lot of middle-aged households are spending not only to live but to keep the machinery of working life functioning at full speed. Once work ends, a surprising amount of that spending simply falls away without any great sacrifice. You stop paying to sustain the rhythm you no longer live inside. Then, if the mortgage is gone or nearly gone, the picture changes even more dramatically. Remove the largest fixed payment from a household budget and retirement starts looking less like a financial cliff and more like a slower, simpler way of living. I have met people with modest savings who lived peacefully because they understood this. I have also met people with enormous balances who stayed anxious because fear, not arithmetic, was governing their life. That is why I say again and again that the absolute number matters less than people think. What matters is whether your spending and your expectations fit the life you are actually living. Peace of mind comes from fit, not from boasting rights. Now, the second truth is one I wish more people understood when they were 40 rather than 70. Your health is your most valuable asset. People spend decades trying to build investment portfolios while neglecting the body that is supposed to enjoy the result. They assume that if they can just get to retirement with enough money, the rest will take care of itself. Then retirement arrives, and they discover something painful. The account may be full, but the knees are gone, the back is weak, the sleep is poor, the energy is missing, the mind is foggier than they imagined. The trip they postponed for 20 years no longer feels easy. The grandchild they dreamed of chasing around the yard is heavier than their body is willing to admit. That is a cruel form of wealth. I do not say this to sound sentimental. I say it because the mistake is everywhere. People underestimate how much of later life is determined by habits that look small when they were younger, walking, sleeping, eating tolerably well, getting things checked before they become disasters, staying strong enough to move, lift, bend, think, and travel. You do not need to become an athlete. You need to remain usable. That is the standard. If you can wake up with energy, walk daily, keep your weight under control, get decent sleep, pay attention to what hurts, and deal with things while they are still manageable, you give yourself a version of retirement that no portfolio alone can buy. I have seen people with moderate means enjoy old age richly because they still had their body, and I have seen very wealthy people imprisoned by frailty. That is why I would tell any retiree or anyone approaching retirement to treat health maintenance with the seriousness normally reserved for estate planning. One protects your heirs, the other protects your ability to still be alive inside your own life. Then comes the third lesson, and it is the one that keeps a person from aging too fast in the ways that matter most. Stay curious. The body is not the only thing that declines from neglect. The mind does too. And intellectual stagnation in retirement is far more dangerous than people realize because it rarely looks dramatic at first. It looks comfortable. A little more television, a little less reading, fewer difficult ideas, fewer new subjects, less effort, less challenge. The days become easy in the wrong way. Then, one morning, a person realizes he is no longer interested in much of anything. That is not retirement. That is withdrawal. I have read constantly for as long as I can remember because reading keeps me alive to the world. It keeps the mind elastic. It keeps me from becoming one of those old men who only repeats what he already thought 20 years ago. Retirement should give a person more time to learn, not less reason to read books that stretch you. Study things you used to be too busy to study. Take an interest in history, painting, science, gardening, languages, theology, chess, music, architecture, whatever makes you lean forward a little. Curiosity is one of the purest forms of youth left to an old person. And because it costs so little compared with the joy it returns, it is one of the cheapest luxuries in the world. Now, let me move to something I learned more painfully than I would have liked. Relationships matter more than work. That sounds obvious, but a lot of people only admit it late, when time has already been spent elsewhere. Work rewards attention loudly. It praises output. It offers status and urgency and immediate reinforcement. Family does not always do that. Friendship does not do that. Marriage, children, grandchildren, siblings, neighbors, the people who actually compose your emotional life, they often get whatever attention is left after the world has already taken its share. That is backwards. Late in life, the scoreboard changes. Nobody lies awake, savoring old meetings. Nobody gets emotional because of the quarterly plan he once finalized in 1998. What comes back are faces, conversations, apologies not made, calls not returned, afternoons wasted on things that now seem too small to remember, except that their cost was time with people who mattered more. If you are retired, this is the place to get richer in the only currency that still grows more valuable as time shrinks. Spend time with your spouse as if the marriage still deserves freshness rather than just endurance. Call your children without waiting for a practical reason. Listen more than you correct. If you have grandchildren, be absurdly generous with your time. They do not need a polished version of you. They need your presence. They need stories, patience, laughter, attention. And friends too. Old friendships are among the greatest assets a life can produce. They carry memory. They carry continuity. They remind you who you were before the world, taught you to reduce yourself to a job description. This is what real wealth looks like in old age. It looks like people. The fifth lesson follows naturally from that. Simplify your life. One of the strangest mistakes people make is to arrive at retirement with more freedom and then trap themselves inside more maintenance. Too much house, too many possessions, too many accounts, too many obligations, too much administrative life. I have lived very simply for a long time, and one reason is that complexity does not usually improve happiness. It merely gives people more things to manage, insure, clean, track, repair, store, and worry about. The extra bedroom, the extra vehicle, the extra closet, the extra subscription, the extra account, the extra storage unit, none of it looks very heavy when added one by one. But after 30 years, the pile becomes a burden disguised as success. Retirement is a marvelous time to reverse that process. Get rid of what you do not use. Shrink what does not serve you. Consolidate what has become needlessly scattered. A smaller life is often a bigger life once the unnecessary weight is removed. That does not mean austerity for its own sake. It means clarity. It means fewer things between you and the people, habits, and experiences that actually matter. The less life you have to maintain, the more life you get to live. That is a bargain worth taking. Now, once a person has simplified, another question arrives very naturally. What am I giving back? This is the sixth lesson. Retirement becomes much richer when it stops being purely about personal comfort and starts including contribution. A person who spends the whole of retirement merely arranging his own convenience often discovers that comfort alone is a very thin source of meaning. Humans are built to matter to something larger than themselves. Work once supplied that feeling, at least imperfectly. When work is gone, contribution must come from somewhere else. That does not require billions, it requires willingness. Volunteer somewhere useful. Mentor someone younger who would benefit from your experience. Help a neighbor. Support a cause that genuinely means something to you. Share knowledge without turning it into self-display. Generosity does two things at once. It helps the world in some small direction, and it protects the giver from the spiritual laziness that retirement can invite. If no one is careful, life that still gives is a life that still feels alive. Then there is the seventh lesson, and this one ruins more retirements than market volatility does. Fear of running out of money, fear of getting sick, fear of losing control, fear of becoming dependent. Fear is understandable. Retirement removes some sources of uncertainty and intensifies others. A person no longer earns in the same reliable way, so every risk begins to feel more personal. The mistake is letting that fear become the manager of every decision. I have seen people spend 20 years in self-imposed scarcity because they were so terrified of future poverty that they refused to enjoy present sufficiency. They held too much cash. They sold at bad times. They declined experiences they could easily afford. They said no to family moments because some corner of their mind kept whispering catastrophe. They arrived at the end with money left and life unused. That is not prudence. That is fear winning. Now, I am not telling anyone to become reckless. Caution is appropriate, but caution and fear are not the same thing. Caution says think, prepare, diversify, keep buffers, and respect uncertainty. Fear says freeze, hoard, and assume the worst deserves all your attention. One protects you, the other shrinks you. If your finances are basically sound, if your needs are covered, if you have a plan and some margin for error, then at some point you must let peace do its work. Otherwise, retirement becomes a long exercise in defending yourself from a disaster that never fully arrives while missing the life that did. That connects directly to the eighth lesson. You need purpose beyond work. This may be the most important non-financial truth in the whole conversation. A person can survive on less money than he thinks, but he cannot thrive without purpose, nearly as long as he imagines work. For all its inconvenience, gives people a script: show up, solve problems, contribute, be needed. Then retirement takes away the script, and many people discover they never wrote another one. That is why the newly retired often feel strangely hollow even when their finances are fine. It is not because they need another paycheck. It is because they need another reason. That reason does not have to be grand. It can be family, it can be service, it can be learning, it can be building something, growing something, teaching something, writing something, restoring something, helping somewhere. What matters is that it answers the morning. If a person wakes up without any reason beyond passing time pleasantly, time can become a burden rather than a gift. Retirement should not feel like waiting. It should feel like directed freedom. And that requires intention. The ninth lesson is one old people often know but still do not fully obey. You cannot take it with you. This is such a simple truth that people recite it lightly and ignore it completely. They spend a lifetime accumulating, protecting, and measuring. Then old age arrives and many of them still behave as though the point is to die with the highest possible account statement. They postpone the trip. They delay the gift. They refuse the upgrade in comfort. They keep saying maybe later, maybe next year, maybe when things are more certain. Then later becomes never. Money is a tool, not a trophy. And if you are old enough to have enough, then the question changes. It becomes less about accumulation and more about use. Use it thoughtfully, not foolishly, not wastefully. But use it in ways that make life fuller now while now still exists. Help a child or grandchild if it can truly change the direction of their life. Take the trip if your legs still work. Support the cause while you are still here to see the good done. Spend on experience, on comfort, on generosity, on things whose value is lived rather than merely recorded. If you die with every option preserved but never exercised, you did not win. You merely delayed life until life ran out. That is a poor bargain. Now let me come to the 10th lesson, the one that I think determines whether the whole final chapter feels heavy or light. Make peace with your past. Every old person carries some regret. Some carry more than others. Things said, things not said, time misplaced, opportunities missed. People hurt, chances passed up. The temptation in retirement is to replay all of it because there is finally enough quiet for old ghosts to become loud. That is dangerous. You cannot fix the old decade by staring at it harder. The past can teach you, but it cannot be relived into a better form. So make amends where you still can. Apologize if one is owed. Repair what can still be repaired. Forgive people who no longer deserve so much free rent in your mind. And then after you have taken Whatever honest action remains possible, let the rest go. Retirement is too precious to spend as a museum of old pain. This does not mean pretending the past was perfect. It means refusing to let dead years govern living ones. At my age, I can tell you very plainly that the present becomes more valuable every year, not because it gets easier, but because you finally understand how little of it was ever guaranteed. That should make you grateful. Yes. But it should also make you practical. Do not spend the remaining years carrying unnecessary weight. If something can be put down, put it down. So when I gather all of this together, what do I really believe retirees must know? I believe they need less money than fear told them. I believe their health is more valuable than their account size. Once the account is sufficient, I believe curiosity is oxygen. I believe relationships are wealth. I believe simplicity is freedom. I believe contribution gives retirement its backbone. I believe fear ruins more life than prudence ever saved. I believe purpose is non-negotiable. I believe unused money is a sad form of victory. And I believe peace with the past is one of the great returns available in old age. None of these lessons require genius. They require honesty. That is why so many people postpone them. Honesty is much harder than sophistication. Sophistication lets people stay complicated. Honesty forces them to ask what truly matters and whether they are living in a way that reflects the answer. If I could tell every retiree one final thing, it would be this: retirement is not a reward for surviving work. It is a new life that demands its own intelligence. Different intelligence. Gentler perhaps, but deeper. The intelligence to know when enough is enough. The intelligence to protect health and love before pride. The intelligence to live with intention rather than drift. The intelligence to stop measuring life only in dollars once dollars are no longer the main question. Do that. And retirement does not have to feel like decline. It can feel like the first time in many years you are finally living on purpose.